Hello, music fans. You're watching Death by Unicorn, and this is my show, What's New 2024, where I talk about new album releases in metal, rock, and prog and give my quick first impressions of them. Today, I'm going to talk about 9 new albums that came out, and they all came out on May 17th, except for one came out on May 16th. I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with my excellent tier, which will contain intervals and their album Memory Palace. This is the 5th album by this Canadian instrumental progressive metal band. It's got progressive rock, gent, and jazz fusion influences in there. And this one is a band that I love everything that Intervals has done. So I expected this to be excellent and make my year-end top 50 albums list. Even though I'm not usually as into instrumental music, I make an exception for Intervals. They're probably my second favorite instrumental band after Animals as Leaders. Check this out if you are into instrumental progressive metal. If you like Animals as Leaders and Polyphia, I think you'll like this album by Intervals. The rhythms are groovy. A lot of them have the gent style of syncopated rhythms over top of a 4/4 beat. There's lots of great melodic lead guitar playing that's both impressive and catchy at the same time. That's Intervals with Memory Palace. Check it out. Second album I want to talk about is Prehistoric Animals and their album Finding Love in Strange Places. This is the 4th album by this band from Sweden, and I'm also putting this in my excellent tier. This is progressive rock with alternative and metal influences. It's very catchy, very accessible progressive rock music. Got hints of metal, but it never goes full-blown metal. So I'd call it more progressive rock. I think it will appeal to fans who like the poppier and more accessible tracks by prog metal bands like Tool and Dream Theater. It essentially sounds like if you turn down the metal in Tool and Dream Theater and turn up the pop a little bit, this is what you'd get. Songwriting here is great. So check out Prehistoric Animals and Finding Love in Strange Places. Now we're moving to my very good tier. And I want to start out by talking about an EP by a band called Darko. This EP is called Greyscale. And this is melodic hardcore punk. And I heard the single from this ahead of time. It was very fast and hardcore and fun. So that's why I put this on my list to check out. This is a very technical punk album, very technical punk music. If you like bands like Propaganda, Protest the Hero, and Choke, I think you'll like this because it manages to be both hardcore and melodic at the same time. Sometimes it crosses over into maybe even into metalcore, but it stays closer to punk for the most part. And the drums really focus on those fast punk beats. I really enjoy Darko's sound here. I'm interested in hearing more music from them in the future. If this sounds good to you, check out Darko and their EP Greyscale. Next up is another one in my very good tier. This is a doom metal album by Pallbearer called Mine Burns Alive. It's the 5th album by this band from the US, and it's epic doom metal. And this one has some emo and shoegaze influences in here that were a bit surprising to me, and I didn't expect them. I'd never listened to an album by Pallbearer before, but I had heard some good things about them. So I was interested in checking this out. Some of the songs on this album just surprised me with how they sounded. There were lots of clean vocals. I've heard in the past that Pallbearer focused more on harsh vocals. And then the song Daybreak in particular sounded very unexpectedly beautiful and uplifting while managing to sound both sad and happy at the same time. And it reminded me of some emo songs, which I wasn't expecting. But it was very well done. So I recommend checking out Pallbearer, Mine Burns Alive if you like doom metal, but want to hear it done kind of differently, a lot more clean vocals, a lot more emo influence. Check it out. It's very good. Next up is Lucassen and Soeterboek's Plan 9, that's the name of the band, and the album's called The Long Lost Songs. It's the debut album from this project from the Netherlands, and this is hard rock with heavy metal and progressive rock influences. And if you recognize the name Lucassen, you might know Arjen Lucassen and his work with Arion and Star One. I'm a big fan of those groups that he works with. The singles for this sounded less progressive and more on the hard rock side than those acts, but they do have a bit of metal and prog sprinkled in. Check this out if you're a fan of Arjen Lucassen and his other projects. I didn't expect this to be better than his other projects, Arion or Star One, from my perspective, but I do think perhaps people who prefer the hard rock sound over prog will like this album better. The opening track, Dr. Robert's Medicine Show, has a main riff on there that reminds me a lot of the main riff in the song Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. And then the main riff on their song Ice on Fire is just this happy major key riff. The chorus on there actually reminds me of the joyous chorus on the song Emma Come On by Moon Safari from their album from last year. So it's just this joyous rock song with lots of nice harmonies. I like that one. So that sounds good to you. Check out Lucassen and Soeterboek's Plan 9 and the Long Lost Songs. 4 more albums to talk about in this video. I'm going to kick it off. Now we're getting into just my good tier. All the albums, the first 2 albums I talked about were in my excellent tier. Then everything else was very good. Now we're just in the good level. And let's talk about Marty Friedman with his album Drama. This is the 15th album by this American musician. This is instrumental hard rock. There is one song that has vocals, but there's some progressive rock, heavy metal, ambient, classical, and jazz influence on here. His playing is very versatile. And Marty Friedman, of course, is a former Megadeth guitarist. He has amazing skills. The single I heard ahead of time was pretty good, so I checked out this whole album. Great guitar playing on this album, as expected. It's essentially instrumental, but the last song had vocals in Spanish. It has a bit of a neoclassical metal vibe on this album, but it doesn't get too heavy. So it's almost like it's not metal at all, and it's more just like this hard rock style and kind of guitar shredder style. And there's also some melodies that remind me of Japanese anime music on here. I believe he lives in Japan usually, so that's probably why I felt some Japanese influence in the music. Check out this album by Marty Friedman if you like instrumental guitar music. That's not usually my style, so I probably won't go back to it that often, but for this style of instrumental guitar music, he does a great job. Next up, another one of my good tier is Of Montreal with Lady on the Cusp. This is kind of quirky art rock, but it's kind of poppy as well. It's pop rock, the 19th album by this American band. It's this pop rock with like indie, psychedelic, progressive, electronic, R&B, and funk. All those influences are thrown in there. And I like what I've heard from Of Montreal before. It's very quirky, pop rock. The early release single I heard from this album was very weird. That caught my attention, so I listened to the rest of the album. It's almost too weird to be pop, but it is also pretty catchy. So I don't know how else to describe it other than weird and catchy at the same time. I probably won't go back to it too much because nothing really grabbed me, but I'm interested in hearing where this band goes in the future. That's Of Montreal with Lady on the Cusp. Next up, I'm talking about Oliver Wakeman and his album Anam, Cara. This is the 6th album by this artist from the UK. It's progressive rock with Celtic, new age, pop, and musical theater influences. And this is a keyboard player from the UK who is the son of Rick Wakeman of Yes. Oliver Wakeman was also in Yes as well for a few years from 2008 to 2011. I'd never listened to any of his solo albums before, but I heard the album trailer for this. I could tell he's a great keyboard player, just like his father, so I checked this out. The album features female vocals from Hayley Griffiths, who does a good job on here. It reminds me of Mike Oldfield albums that have female vocals on them, especially because the music has both that Celtic and New Age vibe that they combine with prog and pop and musical theater in a way that reminds me of Mike Oldfield a lot. There may be some kind of narrative story here, but I didn't really look into if this album has a story or concept. But the lyrics did feel like at times that they were telling a story. So I'd have to deep dive on them to really understand that story in the future. But if you're interested in this kind of musical theater, prog rock, opera, Celtic, new age pop thing with cool keyboards, great female vocals, then check out Oliver Wakeman and Anam Cara. And last album I want to talk about in my video today is Slash with his album Orgy of the Damned. This is the 6th album by this American guitarist, and this is blues rock with hard rock and heavy metal influences. This album is a collaborative blues cover project with a variety of musicians and singers. Slash plays the guitar on here, but on vocals you have singers that include Brian Johnson, Gary Clark Jr., Billy Gibbons, Chris Stapleton, Dorothy, Iggy Pop, Paul Rogers, Demi Lovato, and Chris Robinson, and Tash Neal and Beth Hart. This album by Slash is enjoyable to listen to, but it does sound a bit like just a blues rock cover band playing at a local bar. Mind you, they're doing a great job. It's nice to hear a different singer on each song, although I am glad that they did that rather than just have one singer sing all the way through. I think that would have been really boring if it was the same singer on each one, actually. At least with the approach of multiple singers, you get a variety of vocalists. They each nail their own specific approach and style of delivery. The guitar playing on here is pretty decent, but it does sound like an old man playing quick blues licks. It's nothing too innovative or interesting. I don't think that there's anything on here that would make me ever want to come back to it or listen to it again. But if you like classic blues songs and you just like hearing Slash play guitar in his typical old man bluesy pentatonic lick riffs, then you'll probably like this. So check out Orgy of the Damned by Slash. And that's it for my first impressions on these 9 albums that came out recently in metal, rock, and prog. What did you think of these albums? Let me know down below. And was there anything else that came out recently that you've been enjoying? Also let me know. And stay tuned for next time. Peace out.